The purpose of today's discussion and inform the community about the recent proposal brought forth by the DCF about the strategic sunsetting of interprotocol. Interprotocol. This is a decision that the DCF, the decision to bring the proposal to the community, was a decision that didn't went through a lot of deliberation with stakeholders from Agoric, the DCF board, consultation of course, with the interprotocol. And we'll be hearing from each of the individual guests about their perspective about how this came about, what was the thought process, um, come as a consequence of the protocol shutting down, what is the timeline, etc. We've shared with the community from the DCF perspective, some of the initial thoughts and reasonings as to why the DCF has come to the conclusion as to propose the sunsetting of interprotocol. There's aspects to that, and they'll be discussed today as well. So I can assure you, all of you, the community, that the decision wasn't an easy one. We all certainly wanted and want Interprotocol to be for it to find its market, but various circumstances have caused it not to necessarily see that to date. To date. So I think we'll get right into it and turn into Rick. What was some of the impetuses to the decision to recommend the sunsetting of Interprotocol?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. First off, none of us really want to be in this place, right? We don't want to be here shutting down the protocol. It just is a practical decision that we think reflects market realities and reflects financial realities for the players involved. And it really, in a lot of ways, has failed to deliver on what we were trying to accomplish when we set out. Discussions around the fate of Interprotocol, it's hard to say when exactly they began, right? I mean, at one point in time, the protocol was up to about $7 million in locked value. It looked like it might have some legs, but even at that level, we were thinking, wow, this isn't quite hitting like we were hoping it was going to hit. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and we can go into that. But across time then, as there was a continued erosion in that TVL, and as new tokens were added and the community didn't pick up and engage on those tokens, the writing was really sort of on the wall. And it's an expensive proposition to keep a protocol up and running. DCF, as a supporter of the Agoric ecosystem, had viewed Interprotocol as a public good, and what we're here for is we're here to fund public goods, and we do things that are useful for the ecosystem. And at a certain point in time, you have to look at what you're capable of doing effectively with the resources that you have, and you have to make some choices about where to put that effort. And in the case of Interprotocol, there was a lot of time, effort, money, and expense put into it, and the protocol was never receiving sort of level of adoption from the community that would indicate that this was worth the expense that it was causing. And it just simply wasn't pulling its own weight, right? Is another way to look at it. The protocol is set up in such a fashion that it rewards build stakers, and it helps populate its own reserve, which it has been doing with its fee monies. But it's not yield earning. It is decentralized, and so we have governance challenges with it as well. And on the whole, when it was launched, it was something that we felt would find a reception in the market. Subsequent market conditions have proven that not to be the case. And even as I look around the room right now at the turnout for this call, right, these are not the sort of participation levels that would encourage someone to continue with the community-driven protocol. And that's, of course, not to denigrate those of you who did show up. Thank you for coming to this. We appreciate it. And so that's a rather long-winded answer. But at a certain point in time, to go back directly to the question, how and why did we come to the decision to make this recommendation? At a certain point in time, the DCF board simply looked at the outlays and looked at the results and said, the money's better spent elsewhere. We think that this is not the best use of our resources. We think that we can do better things with this money elsewhere. Let's take it to the community and see what the community has to say. So, Bob, back to you.
Mm, yeah. And we'll get Dean and Joe's perspective as well. But Rick, I'm not sure the community aware of what some of the operational expenses are. What can you frame them into certain categories and maybe put a number on a few of them?
Yeah, I can. And I saw that question come up in the discussions on Discourse as well. And I knew we were doing this call, so I thought we'd just deal with it on the call. The long and short of it is this: Interprotocol on an annual basis for the DCF alone is over $1 million in overhead. Why is that so expensive, you ask? Well, we spun up a bespoke Oracle network for Interprotocol, and that's where the bulk of the expenses are. The Oracle network has multiple node operators. They are providing a very high level of service. They were built from the beginning for a protocol that was intended to scale to a much larger size. So it was really in a lot of ways overbuilt, but it's a very expensive ticket. Secondarily, there is the economic committee. And that group of individuals, which was until just recently 6, all receive a salary. Mind you, it's not huge, but it's still a meaningful salary when you times it by 6. And that economic committee entity has a number of associated running costs, including the corporate structure that shelters them. Now you add on top of that all of the subscription expenses, the website maintenance, the various subscription to different services, the security services that we subscribe to, the analysis services that we subscribe to, all of which are necessary for the economic committee to have the information that they need to be making appropriate risk decisions. And then finally, you add on top of that whatever is spent on marketing and DCF time to basically take care of these things, to shepherd governance, et cetera, to build things like CosGov. When you get below the surface, there's actually quite a bit here, as there is with any protocol, any professionally run protocol, and the numbers just simply add up. And for DCF alone, not even talking about the time that Agoric spent on the project, which is not inconsiderable, it's more than $1 million a year in overhead for us. And frankly, that's money that our board of directors and myself thinks is better spent elsewhere. Bob, over to you.
Actually,
Yeah,
can I
and,
insert
and
a
not to
comment there?
mention some of the operational complexity. Sorry for the pause. I think I'm hearing myself
No,
again.
no, I was
The
trying to insert a
operational
comment, but you're getting
complexity.
an echo. This is Dean.
Oh,
Uh, I just wanted to add on. There's a lot of those where, with investment or with progress, one might reduce, for example, the Oracle costs. But even with those cut down things, the question is, the question I know you guys were considering is, would it pull its own weight? Does it, is its value to the community, sort of recognized and supported? And by this I mean the extended interchain community of, the collateral that backing it and that sort of thing. And some of those costs that are necessary for risk management, I mean, were not stuff that could be reduced, like you say, like the corporate structure. And and that's sort of the responsible thing to do for something that's going to grow, and too much for something that hasn't done the growing yet. And so it's not worth digging too far into, well, what if we improve the Oracle price, because that's the biggest number. It's not the only thing.
yeah, that's a great point. Actually, Dean, I'll lean on you here as well. If we just rewind now from the Agoric perspective to come to decision to propose this to the community.
Okay, sure. And it's not that we proposed it, but we support it. So, we quite some time ago, obviously, we went out to get JavaScript programmers to build smart contracts on the Agoric platform, where we were looking at Web 2. Web 2 at that point had been hammered by, the numerous scandals that impacted IST as well. Just, the not just a bear market, but aggressively negative positioning of the environment. And so that market turned off for quite a while. And we shifted to orchestration, which which is clearly exciting. It's got strong response. It solves problems that a lot of people have, and they now realize they have, and really enables, to my mind, a lot of what we need to build for Web3 to integrate into the rest of the economy. And so we're quite excited about that. But one of the observations was that orchestration wasn't lining up well with IST. And indeed, for many of the use cases that were valuable, um, trying to put IST front and center, which we did in some of these conversations, it was an obstacle, right? It was like, no, we're using USDC or we're using USDT or we're doing our own stable or we just want to use our native token. I mean, one of my favorite orchestration projects, as a, just sort of personally, is, keeping Akash accounts topped up. And we tried to do that multiple times with IST, and it just wasn't relevant to them because they pay for Akash execution on their DPIN network using the AKT token. And if you could keep that topped up by automatically buying it on the appropriate markets using my savings that's in another stablecoin pool, then that would be great. But if you're trying to stick IST in the middle, well, now that's very complicated. I need to think about it, and et cetera. And so it's one of those things where if you're going to solve people's problems, you have to come and find out what their problems are and not come with a hammer. And so it ended up, continuing to be one of these things where we're leading with, so IST would help your problem, help your challenge here. And that was just not the right way to approach how we have an infrastructure that solves a lot of people's problems, right? And so orchestration and so orchestration didn't tie in IST, and it didn't sufficiently tie in build. And so build was only distantly supported by the fact that orchestration would at the end of the day run it and be powered by it, right? But so my thinking, my priority was, okay, orchestration lets us help, work with people and solve these problems. How do we make sure there's a build payoff for that? How do we make sure that build is clearly supported by that build is important to that thing, that build gets some rewards from it, all those kinds of things. And so, from that point of view, then, IST having a life of its own seemed like a possibility, and I know you guys looked at that. But it makes sense to me to have the platform for now really focus on build as the gas and fee token and simplify the tokenomics so that we could grow it into powering orchestration. And that was, that making that connection, meant let's simplify everything we can in order to make that connection really work. And so, if that means shutting down IST, which I completely agree with the price, with the it was built as a common good, but I know the collateral folks, the people behind the various collaterals, drop, ST Atom, ICF, et cetera, all are supportive of IST, all appreciate it, but they aren't supportive enough to bear the cost of operating it, or bear enough of the cost of operating it for the system to be able to support itself and grow. And so, based on that, I think it makes sense to sunset it at this point.
Can I just
Right.
let me just dive a bit deeper into that if you don't mind, Bob. Because I know it's a question that came up also in discourse was, what other efforts have you made to find ways to pay for interprotocol so the DCF isn't footing the entire bill? And to expand on that, yes, we did explore. In fact, we even put together a concept called the Interprotocol Alliance and approached different collateral providers and other key players within the Cosmos ecosystem, not asking them to take over the entire bill, but to contribute to it in such a fashion that with the expense spread among a number of stakeholders, that we had better stakeholder alignment, and we also had a decrease in operating costs for DCF, which will allow us to do some other things. Those discussions were for naught. Not a single one of the parties that we spoke to went for it. Not even a single one said, well, you've asked for X, we could offer you Y. There was zero, zip, zilch. And so, when the stakeholders are not seeing the value and the community participation is so low, we have to ask ourselves, are we wasting our treasury on something that we felt should be a common good, but isn't being treated as such by the community? And, you have to make tough decisions at times. And so we made the recommendation, and hopefully the community sees the sense in this and realizes that, we could do better things with that money. And Agoric could do better things with the focus back on build. And that's really where this recommendation comes from. Bob, over to you.
Yeah, there's really good points from both Dean and Rick there. Uh, as many of you on the call may know, missed of the process right in the middle of the signaling vote discussion period. started sometime last week. Rick, maybe you can give some insight if the community votes in favor of the sunset. Tell us what some of the strategic tactics that the DCF is proposing, maybe,
Yeah, yeah.
and what the actual sunsetting may look like if it's passed.
Yeah, let's talk about this as the binary, right? So if the community votes yes, what happens? If the community votes no, what happens? I'm going to start with no, because that one's short and easy. If the community votes no, that they do not want to sunset interprotocol, I suspect it very likely that the DCF board is going to say, okay, well, we can no longer continue to afford to support it. We're going to cut off funding. And so then the community is going to have to come up with another way to keep the lights on. So, that's a whole new can of worms to open up there. But that's the output of a community vote of no. DCF is making this recommendation based upon decision from our board of directors, and our board of directors' opinion about the outputs not being worth the expense isn't going to change if the community says no. So expect there to be more complexity on the table if everyone votes no. If, on the other hand, people vote yes, you will find in the signaling proposal discussion in discourse a rough outline of the schedule and the key steps in the process as we've designed it for a wind down. Now, we put together the process in consultation with Agoric around the engineering demands, in consultation with the EC around the process for dealing with the vaults that are still open, and of course, speaking with legal counsel and those sort of stakeholders as well. In short, what we are proposing, and if you vote yes on the signaling proposal you are endorsing, is a 60-day wind down period. Now, given the voting timeframes, et cetera, what this essentially means is the wind down would begin approximately May the 1st and would end approximately at the end of June. June 30th, I believe, is the actual date at this point in time if it goes forward according to the plan. The first 30 days is going to be focused on, banging the drums and shouting through a bullhorn to everybody that the windup is coming, that you need to close your vaults, you need to reclaim your collateral, everyone get your ducks in the row, et cetera. So big comms push for 30 days. Banners on the websites, banners on the app, et cetera. We will shut down and limit some minting capabilities so that the situation doesn't get worse, meaning that there's more vaults to close down. We will also recommend to the EC that they reduce the liquidation fees to zero, so people are not paying fees for liquidations. This isn't about the protocol making money on shutting things down. It should be as frictionless as possible. And at the end of that 30 days, then things start to get a bit more interesting. If at the end of that 30 days, we still have open vaults, of course, obviously, the vault holders are anonymous to us, right? We don't know who they are. We can't reach out to them directly. If after 30 days they still haven't taken action, then we've recommended that the EC begin to increase the over-collateralization requirements for the vaults in a staged fashion every week, increasing by 50%, until such time as it forces the vaults into liquidation. Now, we're hoping that people wake up, take steps, retrieve their collateral, and that this doesn't surprise anybody or negatively impact anybody. But Murphy's Law says it will. There'll be somebody who's negatively impacted by this, and we'll have to deal with it. What we're trying to do right now is to be as fair as possible about getting the word out, having adequate time to get it out, and then beginning a structured step-by-step process that will eventually shut down all of the vaults. That is the really quick elevator pitch version of this. I don't know if you can call it an elevator pitch if it's more than 30 seconds, but I did. We're happy to share more details, et cetera. But that is in broad strokes the process. And Dean and Joe might want to add some color to that, but I'm going to stop right there.
I might just add
Yeah,
one quick thing. The design principle for the shutdown is that vault owners should be able to do nothing and have their vaults gracefully liquidated in a way which doesn't penalize them. There is a swap that has to happen, so they'll get some amount of collateral swap for some amount of IST, but it's not prejudiced on one side. It's not the protocol doesn't earn money from the fees. The second principle is that IST holders can turn up any time essentially to claim collateral against their IST. So while it would be ideal for everybody to come in and close their vaults early, I think we wanted to make it so that even if people do nothing and hear nothing about this, they will have the most beneficial treatment for the shutdown. Those are the two things I'd add.
Yeah, just to be clear, liquidation means just enough of the collateral sold to cover the debt, and the rest of the collateral stays in your vault. Even with everything shutting down, the vaults will still be there. You can come in a month later and get your Atom out or your ST Osmo or whatever it is. And so that automatic conversion of just enough to cover the debt, so that now the vault is in the done state, is the main transition there. And so that'll be now the main uh, sort of risk there is it is getting liquidated in the liquidation auction. There will be bidders there that would be delighted to pick up cheap collateral. But if we get enough bidders there, then it'll be at right around market rate at the time for ST Atom, ST Osmo, STT Atom, etc.
Yeah, actually,
And that
speaking
gives
of
the
risks, Dean, well, actually, for Joe, mitigated risks that you can think of that vault holders and users must or should be aware of, and what are some of the steps that they could take to mitigate these risks?
I think the primary way would be to look to pull collateral and repay out of the vault themselves. I think it's essentially a price risk and a risk, as Dean says, that there aren't enough bidders to bidding on collateral. We think that there should be, and we'll hope to advertise broadly that these liquidations are happening, so that the vaults can be cleared at a fair rate. But other than that, I don't think there are risks for the vault holders.
And the community can be assured that the DCF will certainly do its part in communicating with fervor. Should the vote pass, we will establish a clear communications campaign to let all vote holders know the steps that are taking place and the decisions that have been made through the EC and broader as the process goes along, if indeed the vote passes.
Yeah,
I think
let me add one
we
more
got
thing.
some.
So
Yeah, go on, Dean.
so the system is over collateralized. I mean, the design of this was to generally minimize risk and minimize negative economic impact of using a stablecoin, right? That was one of the things that the design had, the EC proceeded with, and so forth. So for the PSMs that let you trade one stable for another, in order to unlock collateral, you need IST to pay down your debt. You can start from any of the standard stables; those will stay on. You can convert from USDT, USDC, etc., into IST just enough to liquidate your debt, just enough to pay off the debt to unlock all your collateral and pull out all the collateral. And then the remaining IST you have, you could then convert back to another stable inside of one of the PSMs. So there shouldn't be a liquidity issue in terms of being able to get enough IST to buy down a debt. There shouldn't be any, oh, there's very little IST for me to get my vault unlocked. I now have to pay $1.50 to get $1 worth of IST. No. PSMs are about, you pay $1 in USDC to get $1 in IST. You get your vault out. So there shouldn't be any issue there.
Yeah, it's a really important point that if it does go ahead, people are going to be able to get right, for lack of a better ease. So we've pretty much come to the bottom of the hour on this one. Just want to go around the room and see if anybody had any last thoughts or want to say before we exit.
I will say that I really appreciate the work that the DCF has done on IST over the years. It was, originally it was a smaller thing intended just for the agoric economy. There was, a big push before it was launched to get out a stable coin that worked across the interchain and could use and unlock the collateral value, because there was a big supply side problem for stables that was, overlapping with, just as the first of the many hits of like UST dying, hit the opportunity for DeFi and Cosmos and various things like that. But it was a bunch of really good work. Navigating over the previous 4 years regulatory issues and how much can people say and how much can we support and how do we make sure it remains decentralized and how do we make sure all the risk happens. The econ committee did fabulous work there, and Bob, you and the others at DCF in terms of marketing this have done great stuff. So I really appreciate all of that work to try to make a just a community supported, decentralized thing happen in the face of competition from closed source and bank backed and centralized things that all had in many ways a much easier time of it. So it was a challenge. It's a challenge that we all, we place bets because we want the outcome on the positive side. We're in a high risk area where a lot of those bets don't work, and some of these bets definitely didn't work. But there was a lot of good work done, a lot of good stuff produced, some of which will continue to carry forward, and some of which informed a lot of the system and those kinds of things. And so I really appreciate all this work. I also do appreciate you guys pushing this through because the first thing, as I mentioned in email about Agoric shift, we want to take the power of the platform and actually apply it to end user products. Several people have beat us up about you got to build the first 5 apps. So we're now all about building the first 5 apps to make all this platform valuable. And so I appreciate the support the DCF provides around that, and this transition will help you know make it clear that build is powering orchestration and orchestration has a bunch of value, and we can all focus on that. And so I think this is focusing for the entire ecosystem, focusing for Agoric, I and so as I said, I support it, and I'm really appreciative of the support you guys have given us over this and given the platform over this long period.
Thanks, Dean. It really means a lot. From the DCF, I know the whole entire team, we took a lot of pride in being the stewards of entity. It does come at a bit of a sting to see this, if it does get passed, despite the costs and all the reasons why this as a proposal. It has been an absolute pleasure. There was a lot of hope, but we understand that that's the way things go. But more so, we are absolutely charged in throwing our full weight of support this next phase of Agoric and what's to come over the next few weeks, months, and years for Agoric, and with the absence of the past Enter protocol, just gives us more resources and time to put DCF behind Agoric. So we're looking forward to it. With that, I'll just encourage everybody in the community to go in and be part of the discussion. There's still a few more days left in the discussion period. The vote. After that, it comes to voting time. I believe the vote will be on the 29th, or sorry, on the 26th, 3 days. And then we'll see what the future holds from there. Again, like I said, get in there, be part of the conversation. Maybe there's new information that you've learned. Base that you want to broaden the conversation about. The DCF is in there, members from Agoric and other stakeholders. So get in there. We're listening, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. So with that, thank you to the guests. Thank you to everybody who have come.